Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're working with a single source to pull out the most vital intelligence and really create a blueprint of actionable knowledge for you.
Mm.
And the source today it's a rare mix, I think, a combination of real vulnerability and some very rigorous planning. We're looking at excerpts from Unbroken, a 365 devotional journal of healing and transformation by Tosha Miller.
It's a fascinating one.
It is. So our mission here is to get past the idea of just, general inspiration. We want to focus specifically on the highly structured, year-long roadmap that this journal offers for long-term emotional and spiritual recovery.
Right.
So let's unpack that. We're really studying a method, a deliberate strategy that's designed to build resilience that lasts.
And we have to set the stage here, give some immediate context. This is a source that's born from faith. It's offering spiritual insights, daily prayer, but, and this is important, the author is crystal clear about its purpose. It's a companion guide. She says explicitly that it is not a substitute for professional counseling, for medical guidance, or, mental health treatment.
So it's not trying to replace therapy. It's more about sustaining the work of healing every single day over a long haul.
Precisely. The central mechanism, the engine of it, is using these spiritual insights, these specific themes, and daily prayer to just sustain that monumental, often exhausting effort it takes to go from feeling completely broken by life to feeling fundamentally unbroken and living with purpose. It's a structured strategy for just keeping your courage up.
And that structure, it has such a powerful grounding. We really have to start with the source of the author's authority here, because the credibility of this whole guide, it comes directly from the sheer depth of personal adversity that shaped it.
Indeed. Her personal history gives all the context for the journal's intense focus on recovery and worth.
Yeah.
She talks about this devastating trauma she experienced at just 9 years old, shattering her innocence. And it was at the hands of people she should have been able to trust completely.
And, that wasn't just some isolated incident that she recovered from later. That trauma, it set a really difficult trajectory for her. Her childhood after that was just defined by immense complexity.
Yeah.
She was navigating a broken family, the isolation of the foster care system, repeated betrayals. She talks pretty openly about being led down a, quote, dark path of despair during those years.
And what really stands out in her story is the pivot point. Despite all of that chaos, the betrayal, the abandonment, she describes finding and holding on to this one unwavering truth, her faith.
The anchor.
That's exactly what she calls it. It wasn't just a comfort. It was the anchor that held her when everything else was being just tossed by the storm.
And those storms, they weren't over. That anchor got tested again later in life.
Yeah.
We often hear about people using past trauma to create wisdom, but in her case, the fight just kept coming.
Mm-hmm.
She faced a devastating breast cancer diagnosis at age 37. And what makes that detail so powerful is that she was a single mother of 3 children at the time.
It just raises the stakes so much, doesn't it? Her fight wasn't just internal or even just for physical survival. She explicitly says her primary motivation was to remain a pillar of strength for her children.
Yeah.
And that demand to be strong for others while you're fighting a personal war, that's the crucible that creates the kind of practical, durable resilience this journal is trying to teach.
So the guidance isn't theoretical at all. It's a distillation of tools that were used under maximum pressure.
That's the key takeaway from her story. And this lived experience, it informs the core philosophy of the whole book, which is that healing is absolutely not linear.
Right.
She sets that expectation right away. She says you'll experience mountaintops and valleys, triumphs and setbacks. The journal's purpose is just to be that consistent companion in the now, whether you're, having a setback or celebrating a win.
And the goal is a big one, to help you find peace, regain your worth, and trust the journey God has set before you. She also clarifies, and I think this is important, that this devotional is the tools, the playbook.
The how-to.
Exactly. While her upcoming memoir, The Truth Behind the Smile, that's where she'll share the full, comprehensive story of her survival.
Which is a good distinction. We're looking at the methodology today, not the whole narrative.
Right. So we have this anchor of faith born from incredible pain. But how do you turn pain into a plan? How does this journal move from a story to a rigorous, repeatable strategy over 365 days?
Well, that brings us to the roadmap to breakthrough. And this, I think, is the genius of the structure. It takes this huge, overwhelming concept of healing, and it breaks it down into 3 distinct manageable phases.
Okay.
Each one lasts about 105 days, and this provides a clear, directed path, moving you from, say, immediate emotional chaos to long-term stability and walking in purpose.
I think that phased approach is so critical because when you're in a crisis, a 365-day commitment just feels impossible.
Absolutely impossible.
But tackling 105 days of specific work, that feels like it has momentum. It's doable.
It is, and the sequencing is the structure's real strength. Phase I is called seeking the shelter. This isn't about solving all your problems, it's about immediate emotional stabilization.
Right.
It's about building a safe emotional perimeter while the storm is, still raging outside.
And within that phase, I see these targeted 15-day themes that address very specific, very urgent needs. Can we walk through that progression?
Certainly. The journey starts with fortitude. That's days 1 to 15. It's all about summoning the courage just to face the challenges. And only after that foundation is laid do you move into solace, which is about comfort in pain, and then serenity, focusing on a heart of peace.
So a very logical, layered approach: gain courage to stand, then seek comfort, then work toward calm. And I noticed that midway through this phase, the theme release, letting go of fear, comes up.
Days 61 to 75.
It seems like the journal deliberately waits until a base of strength is built before it asks you to tackle that deep emotional burden of fear.
That's the strategic timing right there. You can't release profound fear until you've practiced fortitude and you've found some solace. It's an intentional structure. It really respects the pacing of deep emotional work.
Okay, so let's move into phase 2, the work of healing. This is where the focus shifts from crisis management, from seeking the shelter, to internal reconstruction, mending what was broken.
This transition is fascinating. I was about finding safety outside the storm. Phase 2 is about going inside and starting the deep renovation.
I had to push on the sequencing here because this is where the structure gets really interesting to me. The very first theme in this phase 2 is reconciliation, rebuilding trust. Now, given the author's history of profound betrayal, wouldn't focusing on nourishment, self-care need to come first? Is she suggesting that external repair has to happen before internal grounding?
That is a crucial question, and it really speaks to how sophisticated the roadmap is. Because while self-care is vital, the placement of reconciliation first here. It often refers not just to other people, but reconciling with the idea of trust itself.
It's a precursor to even being able to accept the self-love you find in nourishment. It breaks that pattern of isolation first. And if you look, nourishment and self-care comes later, days 61 to 75.
So it forces you to deal with the existential challenge of trust before it asks you to fully embrace self-worth. It makes you move past that victim narrative pretty early on.
Precisely. And it all culminates in this key theme, power within, strengthen our weakness. This is that internal anchor that makes sure you're not defined by past limitations as you move into the final phase.
Which is phase 3. The straight line. This is the shift. From just recovering to actively walking in alignment and purpose, stepping into your worth.
Yes. The focus here is all forward motion. It's about demonstrating the resilience you built in the first 2 phases. We see themes like value, knowing your worth, and it's situated well into this phase.
Right.
That's a huge psychological marker. You don't start phase 3 trying to find your worth. You start phase 3 living it. And this theme is the deep dive into how you sustain that feeling. We also see redemption, healing from the past, and critically unclouded, letting go of a mental fog. That sounds like it's addressing the cognitive residue of trauma, the brain fog.
Absolutely. The mental fog from chronic stress or trauma, it keeps people stuck in those weary circles, as she calls them. This theme is designed to promote clear, directed thinking, which is essential for walking that straight lane.
And I find the inclusion of levity, the gift of laughter later in this phase, to be just a perfect capstone. It signifies that the journey has moved past grim determination and into a genuine, joyful existence.
It signals emotional freedom, doesn't it?
It really does. Laughter isn't just a break. It's a measure of true victory over darkness.
For sure. True healing is measured by the ability to experience joy again, not just the ability to endure pain.
So that structural analysis gives us the why. Now let's transition to the how, the practical daily application of this.
Yeah.
This is where the rubber meets the road, and it's the core of the actionable knowledge for you in this deep dive. How does a person actually do this intensive healing work every single day for a year?
Well, the daily structure is highly disciplined, which serves as a reliable ritual, no matter what your emotional state is that day. Each of the 365 entries gives you 3 distinct interconnected parts: a prayer, a relevant scripture, and a specific, tangible coping tool.
Okay, let's use that first section, fortitude, as our example to see how this cool set works. Day 1, it's titled, When Fear Knocks, Let Faith Answer. It immediately gives you a spiritual affirmation to speak.
Mm-hmm. Choosing faith, even if your voice trembles and your knees shake.
And that spiritual guidance is then paired with the biblical authority of Joshua 1.9, which offers the command.
Ooh.
Be strong and courageous, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. It anchors that emotional requirement in a firm promise.
And then comes the coping tool. This is where the spiritual intention becomes concrete action. The tool for day 1 is to write down 3 things you have successfully overcome in the past.
Which isn't just journaling, right? This is a deliberate psychological technique.
Exactly. We can frame this as cognitive restructuring paired with evidence-based reasoning. When self-doubt or fear kicks in, our brain defaults to failure. By forcing yourself to retrieve 3 verifiable past successes, you're creating tangible evidence to counter the negative self-talk.
It builds immediate self-efficacy.
It does, which makes the spiritual practice functionally therapeutic. Day 2, focusing on strength for the storm, uses Psalm 46.1. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. So what's the practical tool there?
This one is a beautiful merger of mindfulness and spiritual practice. The coping tool is a form of distress tolerance skill using breath work.
Okay.
You take 10 minutes, sit in stillness, and you inhale the affirmation, God is with me, and you exhale, I am safe.
So that's a physiological response to stress. We know breathing techniques regulate the nervous system, and by connecting the breath to those specific affirmations, she's teaching you to associate physical calm with the belief in safety.
It's a powerful method of grounding, and day 3 continues this with, you were built for this. The verse is one of the most famous, Philippians 4.13. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
And the coping tool for that one?
It uses active verbal affirmation. The instruction is to create an I am list. I am strong, I am capable, I am loved, and then to speak those affirmations out loud.
So that moves beyond just internal thought. It's kinetic.
Yeah.
Speaking those words, hearing them, feeling the vibration, it reinforces the self-belief. It's an active process of rewiring those deeply ingrained negative narratives. This is what the daily work of resilience looks like.
We mentioned the structure addresses very specific persistent problems. Let's look at a couple of examples from later in the journal that show how the tools evolve. What about dealing with judgment? That's a big one.
A huge one. It keeps people trapped. So when dealing with external judgment, the journal pairs the promise of Exodus 14.13, the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still, with a really powerful symbolic coping tool. You're instructed to write down the criticism you received. Then you physically replace that lie with what she calls God's truth, and then you ritually discard the writing. Tear it up, burn it, shred it.
That act of physically severing ties with a negative voice is so potent. It provides a tangible anchor for the spiritual concept of letting go. It's an energetic boundary-setting exercise.
It absolutely is. Another critical example comes when addressing the paralysis of failure. The scripture there is Proverbs 24.16a, reminding you of persistence. Though the righteous fall 7 times, they rise again.
And failure often leads to just overwhelming inaction. So what's a proportionate coping tool for that?
The tool is brilliant because it understands that paralysis is broken by minimal action. It doesn't tell you to relaunch your entire life plan. It just instructs you to take one small single step forward in the area of that perceived failure. Just one step.
That's it. It honors the mental state of exhaustion while still demanding movement. It's about building a chain of success out of tiny, achievable links instead of expecting one giant leap of faith.
And the cumulative effect of doing that for 365 days, connecting spiritual principles to these small, tangible behavioral actions, that's what creates the transformation she promises.
It's a remarkable blueprint, taking profound personal adversity and turning it into a structured, day-by-day method for healing. We started with her history of shattered innocence, and we end with the detailed protective structure she built from it.
The macro goal of this entire year-long journey is just perfectly captured in her defining quote. The hope is that this path will turn your weary circles into a straight lane toward your divine destiny. It's all about escaping the repetitive patterns of pain.
So what does this all mean for you, the person navigating your own path toward resilience? We've seen this rigorous structure, the 3 major phases: seeking the shelter, the work of healing, and the straight lane.
And if you were to adopt this kind of resilience roadmap, you wouldn't necessarily just start on day one. But based on where you are right now, which one of those 15-day themes would be your day one? Would it be release? Letting go of fear from that first phase, or maybe reconciliation? Rebuilding trust from phase two, or even value, knowing your worth from phase three?
And then critically, what's the one practical coping tool you could commit to using today? The spiritual breathwork that I am list, maybe documenting your past wins. What's the one thing you could do to stop those weary circles and take that first deliberate step onto your own straight lane?
Something to explore as you connect these sources to your own life.